Hello there, everyone. Julija Simas here for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, and welcome to our Equinox Panel update for 2020. I have with me today some very special agents from around the world who are going to join me to talk about the next 3 months. From the new moons to the full moons to the ingresses to Jupiter and Saturn joining at the end of the year, looking at some astrocartography charts and some mundane charts, so therefore the charts of the USA, the EU and a few other ones, as well as astrocartography. So I hope you bear with us. This will probably take a while, but you will learn a lot. You will see what astrologers do to look at, to, let's say, ascertain the astrological weather ahead. So welcome to you, agents. Can you please unmute yourselves and show yourselves to me? There you are. Hello.
Hi.
So I have with me, first of all, I'll introduce Laura Boomer Trent, Agent 87 in southern France. Welcome, Laura.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. Now, Laura, some of you would know because she does write our our full moon reports and has been doing for a few years. So you'd know her wonderful ways and her understanding of cosmic energy. So thanks for being here with us, Laura. Next, I have Liz from the Netherlands, Amsterdam. Welcome, Liz Hathway. She's also been a writer for the CIA for quite a while and doing some great updates like the last Mars article that we had about the long stay of Mars, which she's going to talk about a bit more. And someone really, well, new to you guys out there, an agent 315, Christos Archos from Athens in Greece. Welcome, Christos.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, great to have you here. And Christos is, look, I can't believe how popular you are. You know, any astrologer would be, you know, like, wow, like you got a following or what? It's fantastic. You know, on you.
Yeah, I think the Greek public are really interested in astrology. So that's wonderful.
Doing well. And so astrology is big in Greece. I mean, it's the kind of birthplace of...
Yes. Yes, the numbers are really high. They're really high right now.
Have you seen them grow? Have you seen them like...
Yes. Imagine that before 15 years, we had around 2,000 or 3,000 people looking at the video. Right now can be even to 50 or 60,000 at the same time views and looking at the, at the video, yeah.
That is incredible.
I have videos that they are even 100,000 views. Astrology is really popular in Greece.
Oh, well, fantastic. Well, we all...
In a good way and in a bad way.
Well, isn't that the truth in so many ways? My background's all completely gone weird. I think it's the darkness has set upon me. It's evening. I didn't think about that. Anyway, I might try and fix it while someone else is talking. But so we're going to talk about the equinox. I'm going to start with Laura, but just before we start, as we look ahead into the next 3 months, guys, because we know 2020 has been such a testing time and it's not over yet. You know, as we know, we've got to get through this phase. But as I was putting all the charts together and stuff today, and sort of by the end of it, it's almost like we can see a better horizon line somehow. Do you get that feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah? So,
definitely.
So, you know, maybe, I know Mars is retrograde and we've still got, you know, all the squares to Mars and the Capricorn stellium to go and a few other things, but it just feels as though as you look at what's ahead, there is a light at the end of this great big 2020 tunnel. So how about we start with Laura. Laura's going to share her screen, and Laura's been studying like solar flares and solar power in a sense for a long time. So we're going to kind of, let's say, feature Laura for the next so long. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you, darling. Hello, everybody. Lovely to be here. Happy equinox. Actually, it's happy stealth Virgo new moon today, isn't it? So I'm just looking at my, hang on a second, my slideshow, hold on.
Yeah, it's not quite the equinox, that's in a few days.
No, a couple of days. So from the beginning. Yeah, so we're doing so today's the new moon, so we're actually seeding, which I thought was really interesting. Good day to choose, Julia. And also quite fascinating, because as you know, I've been really interested in solar flares. I've been interested in the way that for me, astrology could actually just stop with the sun and the moon a lot of the time. I know everything else and all our other markers, they all add nuances. But the actual cycles of the sun and the moon tell us so much about where we are in life. And this particular place in the year where we're at right now on September 2020 equinox is a solar festival, or a solar fire festival. And this is where I actually never know the level of astrology that I'm actually talking to. So I just wanted to keep things quite simple for a second and just say that the sun has 8 particular markers. It has the solstice and the equinox and the cross quarter. And we're at the equinox, which is equal day, equal night. And in the north, it's autumn equinox. And in the south, it's the spring equinox. So there's a definite time of change. And in the old days, we would sit around the campfire and sing "Everything She Touches Changes, Changes," because this is a time of enormous change. And it's actually a time of quite fast change. And those who know me will know that I'm actually quite an experiential astrologer. I like to watch how things work and then apply what we've learnt and how things change, because each generation of astrologers is actually adding to these the giants whose shoulders we are standing on, basically. And so we're able to get in my particular case, which is my particular area, which is spiritual astrology, we're able to go deeper and actually look at the way that consciousness itself is developing. And the sun is the actual symbol for consciousness. And also those who've been following my work know that I work with spirit, sun, soul, moon, and as much as that the sun is that part of us which is always in the process of becoming. It's radiant, it's who we are, it's our identity, it's our physical identity, it's the way that our heart actually beats, and it's also our spiritual identity, it's the luminous, radiant self. So we're looking at your physical aspirants with purpose and presence with the sun. We're looking at the heart-centered, heart-mind. And for the spiritual sage, we're actually use the sun in the horoscope to awaken consciousness. The sun is our relationship with ourself, as well as others, and actually ultimately with divine authority. It's the way that we interconnect with others. It's our connection to karma, and it's our understanding of impermanence. So it's interesting because the sun is absolutely everything, and then it's nothing at all, if you understand what I mean. So the importance of the sun has always been known, and I just wanted to just say that from the Navajo point of view, they teach their children that every morning when the sun comes up, it's a brand new sun. It's a brand new 24 hours. It's born each morning, it lives for the duration of one day, and in the evening it passes on, never to return again. And as soon as children are old enough to understand this, the adults take them out at dawn and they say, the sun only has one day. You must live this day in a good way so that the sun won't have wasted precious time. That came from a book by Pema Chodron. And she says that acknowledging the preciousness of each day is a good way to live, a good way to reconnect with our basic joy, which the sun gives us. The sun is that place where we all feel happy and warm under the sun, and yet it's me who feels happy and warm, or you who feels happy and warm, but actually it's everybody. And Pema Chodron, I should say, is a great Buddhist teacher and has been teaching since like the 70s. So, as I said, today is a stealth new Virgo moon, and the goddess works in mysterious ways. And we have to remember with the season that we're coming from, we began this season with a bang, with a solstice, new moon, solar eclipse, which actually meant that everybody felt it. Everybody felt, oh God, we've got to look after ourselves. We've got to take care. We've got to look after our families. And now we're moving out into the equinox where we're looking after each other, but it's in a much more rational way. It's not in that instinctive way. So it's the beginning of, as I said, of autumn in the north, spring in the south. At this time, there's a longer redshift at equinox, and there are cracks in the Earth's magnetosphere through which faster solar winds come in through the poles and start to spin. We're going to look at that just briefly. I hopefully won't spend too long on it. But it's interesting because cosmic weather actually affects Earth weather. So there's hurricanes and cyclones, and everybody's really zipped up by air, the wind element. Also, there's a faster sunrise, but also, and sunset. But also, I wanted to say with the air element, it's really interesting. I often use Gemini as an example to illustrate why there are two air elements. Gemini has the two twins that you see them, they're like two towers. So the first air element associated, and the spring equinox, is that the spring equinox is associated with the element air. That whole season is associated with the green element air, according to the Chinese and Ayurvedic elemental systems. And Libra also is an air sign, and so but it's a white metal air sign, which is space. So with the two equinoxes, we have one which is wood and the other which is space, which is kind of interesting. So we get a real sense of the way that the winds flow. They flow from the sun to the earth and within us as well. So we can get a bit twitched out within the animals. You often see horses get a bit twitchy in the winds. But it's the way that the energies flow is through winds. Also, I wanted to say that many Catholic churches, interestingly enough, are aligned with the setting equinox sun, when the light of the sun shines through an east-facing door and it's illuminating the holy altar. St. Michael's Day is the 28th of September, and you'll note also in sort of like quite traditional Catholic or religious places, they will have fires at the top of hills around that time. And in many ways, they're actually aligning St. Michael's sword of truth with Apollo, the sun god. And the west is the direction of Libra, which is ruled by Venus, which is all about relationships, which is interesting. So we sort of like come a full circle just in that one slide. But actually what's happening with the sun is that it's changed cycles. And this is really important because the sun does 11-year-ish cycles. These can range from 9 to 14-year cycles. And it's fantastic in as much as that we seem to collectively move in these waves with greater activity towards years when there are more solar flares, more solar winds, much more solar activity. And this particular cycle, which was announced the day before yesterday, just in time to seed again in the for the equinox, NASA announced that solar cycle 2025 was official, it's in, and it will peak around 2025. So it's a bit quiet at the moment, but having said that, we had some activity in May and June. And now we're going to look at more solar flares actually growing as they, and I'll show you how that happens. But it's fantastic the way that this particular cycle began, because actually 9 months ago at December solstice in 2019, there was nothing going on. It was finished. That was it. Solar cycle 24 was finished. And that was the end of the yellow pig sow year, right? So that was finishing on a yin year. Now, not only that, it changed to become on a yang year, which is the Iron Mouse year. And I was actually thinking also why a lot of us are actually, well, everybody's feeling things because the mouse is everywhere. Everybody's scuttling around. Next year's an Ox year, and it'll be a lot more stable, a lot more secure, a lot more reliable. But anyway, this particular cycle by spring equinox, it started to rumble. And that was when the sun was exalted in Aries, Mars was exalted in Capricorn, and they were all in connection to the triple big boy conjunction, which is, of course, as we know now, is Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto all in Capricorn. And we've been watching sunspots for thousands and thousands of years. I kid you not. In the Chinese Book of Changes, the I Ching, which dates back to the 12th century BC, it mentions Ri Zhong Jiang Mai, I hope I've said that right, which means a star was seen within the sun. And a lot of these, although there are records of, they say that they saw these stars within the sun, a lot of the records have actually disappeared and we can't actually find them. So the first actual sunspots, and there are no, I haven't been able to verify the date, so I didn't actually put the chart in, but the Chinese were really hot on sunspots. They understood that 11-year cycle when collectively we get more excited as sunspots become more active, and then we calm down and things get a bit dodgy when it's quiet period, which is what we're in right now. The Greeks also saw them, but misunderstood them, or that Aristotle, and they thought that they were transits of Mercury. And it wasn't until in the West anyway, until Galileo Galilei recorded his, and this, can you see my cursor here? This is his illustration of sunspots growing, but you can get an idea. You know, the sun goes anti-clockwise, and so the sunspots are moving around, and it's when they actually, when they're accompanied by flares, do they actually impact here on Earth. But it wasn't until 1843 that a German astronomer, Samuel Schwab, discovered that there were sunspot cycles. He, for every year, for 17 years, from 1826 to 1843, he would scan the sun. I don't know what his eyesight was like at the end of it, but please do not look at the sun through a telescope without professional lenses, because you can get blinded. Galileo's eyesight was actually stuffed by watching the sun. And then Galileo himself didn't actually follow through to the 11-year cycle. As I said, Samuel Schwab, in only, 160 years ago. So we've been actually watching them now quite regularly. But I will put his chart in, although it's an interesting chart. You look at it and you think, well, yes, he's got all that sort of, he's got Uranus, Mars in Leo, so that kind of makes him a bit of a showman astronomer. But I put his chart in primarily because of the 28 degrees of Capricorn moon. And although this is a 12 o'clock chart, because we're talking about the sun and I couldn't find a time for him, so I put him on a 12 o'clock chart. So after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he will go into Aquarius. But I still like it because it's a chart that's still alive. This particular chart is still being activated by the triple conjunctions. So it's a chart that lives, and I love that because I love the way that horoscopes keep continuing after the end of people's lives. So is solar 25 going to be similar to that of 24? Well, yes, apparently it is. And we had some whoppers in solar 24. July 2012, that was massive, and it was almost as big as the Carrington event. So basically, solar 24, we're supposedly going down to a smaller, less activity. But I'm not sure, because obviously climate change obviously has an impact upon the way that our Earth interacts with the various different flares that come, especially if they're pointed in Earth directions. And supposedly we're supposed to go into this cooler period, and that may happen because of all the ice caps melting, but then that won't last long because that's only like 4 or 5 years, and then all the water will start to heat up again. But the Carrington event was like the biggest solar flare that ever happened, and it was in 59 or 69, I can't read that, 59. And it was an X28. Now that is massive. Normally they go from C's, M's, and then they go up to X. The X flares are the biggies. And if they're Earth directed, and this particular one was on the 1st of September in 1859, and it knocked out all the information carrying telegraph poles, and everybody went down in the, that's why people have said, that's why space engineers are really hip on trying to figure out how to look after their satellites, because they're going to be in the firing line if they're in an Earth directed solar flare. But it's fascinating because we've got all this Virgo, and this is actually the correct time for the flare. And so Virgo, of course, is the sign of communication. And it was very powerful. I think maybe 3 or 4 people even died. And so it was actually, so this so far is the biggest X flare, but the one in July 2012 was on a par, and we're not sure whether or not. So the fact that NASA might say that this is a quiet period, we still get massive solar flares. Just to illustrate how we get these flares, they come Earth directed. They come in through the poles, and especially if it's accompanied by coronal mass ejections, and the electromagnetic energies then come in through the poles. And in this particular case, it's carrying lots of oxygen from the light of intelligence, which is our sun. And just to explain the solar cycle, in 11-ish years, as I said, it can go from 9 to 14, and it's that also that the magnets can change. So you get these, so it's almost like that the sun is breathing, you know, like there's this energy where it gets more active, and it's an 11-year inhale. So inhale changes its poles change from negative to positive, and these also flip around in 11-year cycles. And it's, so basically what we're looking at is actually a 22-year cycle with the pole switch. And I was looking at that and seeing that actually the pole switches seem to happen with Chinese animal signs when they say that it's either yin or it's yang. So if it's a yang sign, the change happens towards yang, and if it's a yin sign, the change happens towards yin. I hope that makes sense. And how these particular sunspots are thought to develop is that there are magnetic field lines which start to get twisted and entangled underneath the surface of the sun. And then they become so taut that they will just push through the surface and break through. And whether or not that accompanies some kind of coronal mass ejection, which is like this big bubble, this big loop of energy, which is literally just filled with ions, protons, electrons, plasma. And all this is basically soul food for planet Earth. You know, we can have oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, helium. We get all these different elements from the sun. All these different life-giving elements all come from the sun, and they all come in through the poles. And you can actually see here that so this is an Earth-directed coronal mass ejection, and these coronal mass ejections are massive. I mean, literally like hundreds of thousands of miles wide. And they can be very strong, especially if they've got a lot of, especially what they're saying, that which part of the cycle it comes in. But I'm not sure if I can actually, this is why we're still watching it, if we can actually say X, Y, Z is a good day for solar flares. because there are so many different aspects to take into account. But within that, what we see is that all the electrons, the protons, the photons, the light-giving power for us as humans and all living life on planet Earth, it comes in through the Earth's poles and then dissipates around the poles in the form of auroras. And what they say actually is that energy that comes in through the South Pole is actually very destabilizing, but energy which comes in through the North Pole is less so, which is kind of interesting. So in terms of Kundalini, thinking about it in terms of Kundalini, that Kundalini rises, Kundalini Shakti rises from the base chakra, whereas a lot of the Tibetan meditations, they come in through the crown chakra. And they come in and they rest in the heart. Whereas the Vedic system is to come up from the base chakra and to rest at the heart by going up through the Svadhisthana and the Manipura and rest in the Anahata, the place which is unstruck, and to radiate outwards within ourselves. And of course, you know, we only see X amount of what's coming in. We just see a tiny little slither of what's going on in that, what we call the biofield, or the fluctuating vacuum of energy that we have. We've got radio waves, infrared waves, all these different waves, all the way up to gamma rays, some of which are very difficult and you know, which we harness. The gamma rays, for instance, they can kill you, but they can also cure cancer. They can actually get rid of cancers. So some things which are good for us are actually some things which are quite difficult for us. But the point I'm making is that upon each atom, within that 99.9% vacuity within the atom, there is that light of intelligence, that spark of light. And that comes in through the poles. And within that circle, within the circle of the sun, the circumpunct, it's the eye, it's the sun, it's the zodiac and the planets. And what they say, what the Vedic rishis, the ancient sages from India, they say that when you say Om, you're actually creating something called a Shri Yantra within you. And there are tonoscopes and cymatics which actually show that when you do sound, when you actually express sound onto your tonoscope, it can actually come up in the shape of Shri Yantra. And I have to say that when I was looking at the way that the sun was awakening, it reminded me of Shri Yantra, because it was like these particular lines, all this in this particular illustration. This is, believe it or not, actually showing how creation starts from this very tiny dot, the bindu, within which all life springs from and then collapses back into upon the moment of death and your passing. But what's interesting is that the first line ever given to the Sri Yantra, and this is according to much beloved Mike McGee from shivashakti.com, a fantastic Sanskrit scholar who basically did this big illustration of the various different triangles and the directions within the Sri Yantra, which is, the Sri Yantra is this mandala, this magic mandala, dedicated to the 64 energies or the 64 powers of the goddess. So it's saying that when you come in from the south, from that point of the goddess, and actually the first point that it springs out towards from the sun is Saturn. This line in this particular mandala, this bottom line here, is Saturn. So this is about giving life form, which I loved. We won't go into that because that's a whole trip in itself. But the point is that we'll to actually go into the Sri Yantra and actually watch how it builds up and see how it's all associated with the moon and the sun and the various different planets, and how we actually can interact with that ourselves in meditation, and how we can use that to actually elevate our consciousness. So here we are, and it's equinox. And so how do we elevate our consciousness? Well, I really liked this. I really loved it. In fact, I looked at the equinox chart and I thought, wow, this is one of the better ingress charts for the entire year. It's got the equanimous Libra. It's got joy in the moon in Sag. And I really loved the optimism. I was happy to see transformation. And I think that the Mars retrograde is about the healing warrior going back inwards to actually to look at ways of healing the feminine side and their own masculine side, as well as the abuse that we've actually given to each other because of, I'm saying that because of Black Moon Lilith down there, and also because of the actual collective chaos. And I think we're looking at ways of managing that. And of course, there are some fixed stars, Spica and Arcturus, with Mercury in a couple of days' time, and that gives me great hope because they are helpful and nurturing stars, as well as Antares being with the moon in Sagittarius, which is slightly obsessive in its direction towards success, but success is almost assured. All we have to do is to keep our confidence steady and sure. Okay, remain steady and sure. So I don't know if you want to go through all these. Julia, how am I doing on time?
We might move on a bit because, yeah, we've got a bit to get through. But
okay, then I just want to say for Libra is the sign of peace, love, harmony, fairness, and justice. And then I looked up equanimity on the good old wiki, and look what it came up with: having an even mind. This is the time of the equanimous mind. So I'm going to close my doors. Just pretend I'm Artemis with all my with my pack of dogs outside. It's about having an even soul within us. So this is about keeping our electromagnetic energies pacified in a state of psychological stability and composure, which is undisturbed by experience or exposure to the emotions of others, pain or other phenomena, as well as within, and may cause others to lose their balance of their mind. The virtue and value of equanimity is extolled and advocated by a number of religions and ancient philosophies. Indeed, in Buddhism, the equanimity is one of the four immeasurables, the others being compassion, loving kindness, self-generated joy, and equanimity. And that's basically what I'm seeing as being very nicely empowered with the particular September ingress. And with that, I'm just going to leave it at that for the moment. But basically, this is about, there's two big cycles starting. I mean, there's quite a few actually. There's been the triple conjunction at the beginning of the year, the great mutation at the end of the year, and this new 11-year solar cycle, which has been slowly moving into action, basically, with a peak in 2025, when of course all the planets will have changed. Neptune will be moving into Aries, etc. But it's quite an exciting time for us solar watchers, that's for sure. Okay, any questions, or are we going to just move on?
Let's just check with the agents that are online here to see if you want to add anything to that. Thank you for that, Laura. Fantastic. I never knew that the sun had a 28-day rotation. So it's really kind of the moon, so in sync with that in its cycle.
It's fascinating, 28, because it's the moon, and then we've got Saturn, and then you've got your progress lunations, you've got your you've got 7-year shifts of Uranus. You've got these various different markers with that 28. You've got your 4 7s. It really does work, the 7 days of the week, etc.
Yeah, right. Yes. Christos.
I'm just want to mention something that the ancient Greeks didn't believe that the Mercury was transiting the sun. The mistake was of the Western Europe. The Western Europeans were having Aristotle like a god. So when in 807 AD we had huge sunspots because Aristotle believed that the heavens were perfect and unchanging, they say Aristotle is right. So this is not something, this is Mercury just transit. On the other side, the Byzantines, they saw that it was a defeat of the sun because the Byzantines belonged to the eastern part, and the Byzantine astrologers predicted that Nicephorus I, a Byzantine emperor, will lose from the moon. The moon was the Islam. So indeed, Nicephorus I lost the battle and he had to pay for the Muslims. So they saw it completely differently how the sunspots were working because the Byzantine Empire was the sun. So sunspots in the sun meant something bad.
They didn't like.
Interesting.
Yeah, right.
Interesting. Well, that's because everybody is, can I just say, fascinating about that, the Greek stuff. Yes, of course, the church has a lot to answer for, but the fact that collectively we get energized by the solar flares. So every 11 years we get more agitated. And so I can imagine if it was, you know, like the king wants to rule, then to have all these people sort of like running around being creative and doing their own thing, it's slightly anarchic for the ruler. But thank you for that, Christos.
I have a comment as well, because in 2012 there was that solar flare, wasn't there, a big one that we just seem to miss. Would you say it's true that if we actually, you know, got a proper solar flare that hit Earth, that all of our networks, our computer systems, that it would disrupt our, what would you say, our way of communicating via?
They do. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yeah, it can basically knock out satellites, and I think in 2012, if I remember rightly, the whole of Canada got knocked out for about 8 hours. It might have been less, I can't remember. But, you know, countries can actually lose their ability to communicate, lose the internet. I mean, we're so reliant on it now as we're going into all this at the age of Aquarius so much.
That's so interesting because our networks are going up into space or, you know, around the planet, and they'll be easier knocked out. I watched something the other night on space wars. Our new wars are going to be in space, and kamikaze satellites, you know, to take out other countries' satellites and stuff. Like, you know, unbelievable. And you kind of that's right. And you think that Aquarius zone, and then the sun, how powerful the sun is, you know, Aquarius, you know, Leo sun, Aquarius, Saturn, that can be so opposite. Like, how's it going to work? Probably not as smoothly as they'd like, you know. Yeah, interesting stuff. I was just going to comment that when all those riots were happening in Minneapolis and stuff, wasn't there a big solar flare then? That was
could well have been. There was some solar flares. There were just some big ones, which actually just that was at the end of April. Was that in Minneapolis? I don't know. I can't remember. I'm not always good with the news. Yes, so yes, there was a big solar flare. That was the activating point. You know, that was a point where everybody went, oh yeah. Now, of course, because Mars is in. Where am I? Because Mars is in Capricorn, and then and the Sun was actually exalted in Aries, and those two working together, those two yang elements both working together, because Howard Susport would always call Mars the Sun's henchman. You know, if there's any old work that needs to be done, call in Mars, get things happening with Mars.
Yeah, right.
They used to call him the interim manager, you know, somebody that you get into a company to sort of shuffle everything, boot people out, reorganize, and then bye. You know, that sort of come in and cut back and do the dirty work, basically,
Yeah.
Well, he's doing some work now, isn't he? Being retrograde, he's going against his grain. We're all going against the grain somehow. Just back to the equinox chart, I think, Laura, and thanks for introducing that to us. But the Sag moon, I was just looking at the Libra ingress, and we had a Gemini moon just on the node just before an eclipse. So, you know, the kind of dark moon and eclipsed, nearly an eclipsed moon. And this 3 months is now a Sagittarian moon, as Laura said. You know, there's a lot more optimism. There's a lot more kind of, let's say, moving forward, isn't there?
Yeah.
Kind of, and just, you know, I want all your comments about all this stuff going on, but I just wanted to add, as you talked about the sun, the Libra sun at the equinox, I've just added some new points that Astro Gold is now able to add into their charts, and it's the black holes. I've just added
Yay.
the super galactic center, which is 87, M87, Laura, for you. And as you talk about the solar flares and being connected to, you know, kind of the biggest force in our local, well, kind of super galactic space that we turn around. And it's just interesting that that coming together, you know, at this time of the year anyway. But we did a great webinar with Rod Chang the other day in regard to all of this. If anyone's interested in more, that is on the site.
That's great.
Yeah, you got that? Yeah, it was great. Anyway, so just a few comments, guys, on this equinox chart, because, you know, the tradition is that sort of guides us, and we look at that for the 3 months ahead in a way.
Yeah, I have a few comments on it. I think what's interesting, like from the way I look at and read the chart, the sun is actually unaspected. If you take out the major planets and don't include Chiron. So this is kind of, in a way, quite a weak sun.
Right.
It's mutual reception with Venus in Leo, so it's leaning on the female energy, and actually in this chart it's the female planets that are giving the lift here. So we have, you know, that approaching grand trine which the moon will create. It'll hook Venus back up with Mars through a fire trine. So there is optimism in it, but there's also, I think, in this chart a high degree of chaos. Mm-hmm. And that I see with that, you know, the bundle of planets there in Capricorn squaring Mercury opposite Mars, because Mercury is an interesting player this year. At the moment of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, Mercury snuck in between them at the moment supreme, right? They were there. If it was a horror, they would have had an interruption. Mercury got in there. So Mercury here, that T-square to the Pluto in exactly the spot of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, that is a strong element of chaos as well. And the sun is really weak. It's not really able to do much with the energy. So in my view, this is a kind of a rogue kind of chart as well. And if I was advising any, you know, presidential candidate at the moment, I would be saying, promote your female candidate, get your women out there, get the women out to vote, because Trump will be taking back Roe versus Wade if he gets a chance. Get the women vote out, because, you know, that I think is what this chart is really about, mobilizing women, get that grand trine working. Yeah. Because they don't say for nothing, you know, if America if America catches a cold, the whole world sneezes. So who gets in there is massively important this year, because he's going to take us into the new cycle, Jupiter-Saturn 20-year cycle. So, and all these big cycles starting now. So who gets in November, I think, is hugely important for all of us. That's my comment on it.
Mm.
I would like to say that this moon in Sag is also in conjunction with Antares, and this is a very, very important, because when we talk about Antares, is at the same time we talk about an axis, the axis of Aldebaran and Antares. And usually when moon, and according to Robson and the older astrologers, when this moon is in conjunction with this fixed star, is always about having problems with people, with the masses, and how we can control. That's exactly what also Laura and Liz said already, this chaos, this problematic situation. And of course, these squares with that Mars is forming with Pluto and Saturn are all, and of course Aries, all this is very powerful. But at the same time, this moon is forming a parallel with Saturn.
Right.
So we can see that this parallel is about the lack of emotional communication, about the lack of proper things or money or elements that will help the masses to survive. Also, Ceres, the planet of food, is out of bounds. When that means that we are going to have problem with food, and I'm going to speak later on about the emotional and the physical starvation that many countries they are going to fight for, not Australia or New Zealand or France, but we will going to have a real problem, for example, in Africa or in Asia. And then we have this north node forming a contra-parallel with Jupiter and Pluto. And all that has to do with who holds the money, because all of this, it's like going back and changing the game, and who is going to have the most money, who is going to control, who is going to have the power, because Capricorn is about power, and a lot of things are fight each other right now. And it's about, am I going to control or you are going to control? And this is a secret war within all this. And we have, of course, all of these elements of aggressiveness and of being blocked, as already the ladies said before. And I think this is going to be a real tense 3 months.
Definitely. Massively tense.
I just confirm Mercury's just about to go into the shadow of where it stations as well for the next retrograde we can talk about. But let's move on, because more will come to light as we do the next charts, incorporating the full moons and the new moons of this next quarter. Just like at this full moon, which Laura might want to say, or any of you might want to say more about, it's just, as we finish September, we've got to remember that Pluto and Saturn Saturn at this point of the full moon has already gone direct, and Pluto will follow soon after. But it's their next closest conjunction that has happened this year from January. They only ever had one exact one, but this is their next closest one. And as Christos, you mentioned, Ceres is out of bounds at the moment, and she's been out of bounds since the 24th of August. So she's the only dwarf planet out of bounds at the moment, and goes back into bounds on the 4th of November, which is an interesting date as well. So any comments about this full moon?
Yeah, just before the full moon, as you're saying, on Saturn, going forwards, Saturn goes forwards on the 28th of September, which is this big sword of truth day, the St. Michael's Day, when all churches, if you go to some churches and, some really big, important Catholic, or any churches really, you can, even Ephesus, I think, has it, old temples where the sun aligns with the altar. And it's about our own authority. I think it's our own authority is going forwards. Mm-hmm. So we'll see with that one. I love that. But I actually think that this full moon is very much to do with self-healing. If we look at that.
Chiron and moon.
Yeah. That Chiron and the moon. It's like you be your own shaman, and because the spiritual warrior really is the warrior side of ourselves, and that's the divine masculine as well as the divine feminine. We're looking at really healing within ourselves, because we have to. If we don't, then
yes.
I'll comment on that Saturn as well, because the Saturn station there late September is you get the Mars square to Saturn on the day that Saturn goes direct. So that and at this point, Saturn is not really on speed. He's only just gone direct. So I kind of think it's where are the planets moving towards. Opposition is always a kind of a turning point in something. It's a sort of high point, a point of awareness, a point of also maximum distance from the people and the ruler symbolically. So I'm kind of interested when I look at this is where are the planets moving towards? What space do they have? And Mercury is, of course, opposite Uranus in this chart. I think it's in an opposition to Uranus as well. I think maybe around the time of the election, but that Uranus-Mercury opposition as well. It's kind of like what's happening in the news, what's happening in the press. We're coming into the late phase now of this election. We've got 4 weeks. So we know that, yeah, that there's a big difference, I think, between how we can individually work with a kind of energy like this and how it could possibly manifest itself in the collective, if you know what I mean. I think there's a difference there between how I can deal with it and how, you know, the collective on a bigger screen. Because I feel the way the election is being framed in the US, Mars at the moment in the 4th house of the US horoscope, it's being framed around law and order issues. That's one of the main themes in this election, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you look at the France and Germany chart, they are both having, France has his sun and moon around the degrees of this full moon. And Germany has a sun-moon opposition exactly around those degrees. Right. And France and Germany are the main cores of European Union. We are going to say that later. So I think that this full moon is going to bring a lot of things on the surface and some real important decisions. And at the same time, you have this Mars-Aries conjunction, exact conjunction, the exact in conjunction of Sun and Uranus. And if you look, this Mars is forming a contraparallel with Neptune. So all this is about being in a very, very tense situation, has a lot of aggressiveness, a lot of power to show off. So I think this is going to bring a lot of results and perhaps negative situation. And I think that this full moon is also a problem in the Eastern Mediterranean. If you know right now what happens with Greece, Turkey, Egypt, and Cyprus, we have a whole lot situation right now. I'm not going to say politically who is correct. I'm Greek, you know who I'm going to say that is correct, but we are going to have a lot of things in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I think that October is going to be really, really tense in the region.
Yeah, that opposition actually falls across the ascendant-descendant axis, of course, of the UK chart. So we're coming into this sort of, you know, this kind of birth canal now. And you can, you know, and the sun in the UK chart is right in there in 10 degrees something Capricorn. So this is definitely, you know, like France, Germany against Britain trying to mash out some kind of a deal, right, before the 1st of January. So it's all happening. It's all
Is there a treaty going on, peace treaty as well? We'll talk about that later, maybe. Just wanted to add Ceres out of bounds. I remember we looked at this around the bushfires in Australia that were really bad. Ceres was out of bounds, and she went out of bounds at the time that the American bushfires started to get really, really bad. So it's just a kind of interesting connection. Haven't done enough kind of study on that, but Ceres has got to do with the flowering of the planet. So the giving and the taking away in that sense, just as much as Pluto does. And we often don't in a different way, but in the feminine way. Yeah. And we don't associate her with enough power, I don't think, as we do Pluto, because we don't know enough. Anyway, so now this is the new moon in Libra. So we have the new moon 23 Libra, which is of course squaring and T-squaring Mars, the Saturn.
Yeah, that's a
kind of T-square land, aren't we? It's just, it's not going away. And Mercury's retrograde, of course. I think it went retrograde just a few days before that. Oh, hang on, I've got it down here, 13th of October. And yes, as Christos was saying before, the Mercury opposite Uranus as well. It's quite a volatile chart in that sense as well. Mercury retrograde opposite Uranus. Whoa.
And Uranus has got Hamel, this particular, it's not a very nice star hanging around. It's not quite within, I don't know, is it within orb, Christos?
Of what?
Of Uranus of Hamel. And Hamel is quite a difficult star. It's like, you know, it's a star of people kind of losing their minds, and
We've got
very highly excited and erupting and even more Uranian than ever, basically. But it's also next to another fixed star, which is more stabilizing. So we get, it's that one's a bit mad and the other one's stabilizing.
Well, talking about
Anyway.
the fixed stars, the new moon is exactly conjunction with Spica, which has to do with brilliance and Arcturus. They are both activated. But I think Hamal is on the 0 degree of Taurus, or 1.
I thought it was 7.
I'm not sure about Hamal, but
Well,
I'm sure that Arcturus and Spica is there.
We'll anyway, yes. But let's go back to the Spica and Arcturus, because that's really good. That's you.
Yeah, so you mentioned something about that earlier. So what's the new moon on those two stars kind of giving us?
Well, the Spica is about giving an offering, giving a gift. The Spica is, I forgot the name, the thing that we make the bread, how we call that in English?
Grain.
Yes.
Grain.
So the Virgo holds a grain. Spica is the grain. This is the part. And again, we see that there may be problems with food around the world. And at the same time, we have Arcturus, which has to do with different approaches, different ways of thinking. And I think that the problem with all this new moon opposition, Mars and Aries, Neptune forming an opposition with Venus, Neptune, and Mercury with Uranus, about we will not know what is true and what is not. So we are going to feel like everything is possible, and all this opposition, and of course the T-square that we already, I believe we all saw it at the first blink of the moment when we saw the chart, has to do with conflict and has to do with how all these different approaches cannot get well together. And we are going to have all these tense situations. For example, for me, what I'm seeing in the United States right now is like completely, it's like I'm seeing another country. I couldn't ever believe that in 2020, I can see white people attacking black people, and we have all these tense, and we have, you know, all these people that died because just of their color. This is really, really messy right there, and it's going to activate the US chart, unfortunately, because this is before the elections, right? Yes.
Yeah, a couple of weeks before,
This is going to be tense.
Yeah, completely. But again, I like Venus, you know, we have this Venus ruling the sun and moon, and basically, you know, there is this, if we could bring women in, you know, there's that opportunity there for, the women have done so well, the women leaders with COVID, right? I mean, it's been in the news a lot, you know, we've had a hen in New Zealand, we've had Angela Merkel, who now is sort of getting credit as well for how she dealt with the refugee crisis at that time when she, you know, women leaders. So this, I find this Virgo, you know, I find that energy of Virgo there, you know, I think that's really special. And she's actually offering something as well to Jupiter, to Pluto, to Saturn, you know. There are ways forward out of the mess we're in if we can open ourselves to just a fresh way of looking at things. This masculine, and it's a perfect election, isn't it? You know, we've got the two oldest candidates ever, you know, and it's a Capricorn, you know, it's only once in the election history has an election been fought on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. I mean, we've got these two old guys slogging it out. Thank goodness we've got Kamala Harris in there. There is one woman in there, you know, because I think Venus in Virgo is interesting there, rising before the sun.
Well, hopefully she's there to fix up a few things. Fix up a few things.
She can offer something to Jupiter.
Yes.
And Pluto.
Yes, that's a nice application to Jupiter. Okay, let's move on. Full moon in Scorpio now. This is just before the election you're talking about. Venus is stronger. She's now in her home sign. Mercury is still retrograde. And the third Pluto and Jupiter conjunction is still to happen, sorry, but it's getting very close again as well. Yeah. So look at that, the moon Uranus for this full moon. So we
and Mercury slowing down.
So Venus will be on the midheaven there of the US chart, coming up to US Saturn. So again, you know, if you take astrology as an advisory art, again, that's what I'm saying. You'd be saying to candidates, get your women out there, get your female vote, put women on your stand, on your ticket, you know, because that's quite nice there, I think, Venus in that position. Hopefully the women are going to get out.
Well, opposite Chiron as well. So, you know, Chiron's kind of featuring these as well somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, and the moon is in Taurus as well, which is always kind of, I always find that has a soothing effect, the moon in Taurus, even though it's an opposition. I mean, Taurus is not easily roused, really, you know, it's kind of got that kind of...
Conjunct Uranus, I think it might be.
Especially
oh, that's true. I can't, you're right, it is. It's yeah.
And this is the one that has the conjunction with Hamal that Laura was saying.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So let's keep moving. So now new moon in Scorpio, of course, 23 Scorpio. What are we seeing here? Venus opposite Eris. We got the square to Jupiter with those two. So a lot of 23s in this one, or 23 degree aspects going on.
So it's easy enough.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, just saying, and Mars is going forwards.
Yeah.
So, and it's at that, the thing about when planets are ready to go, they're stationing to go forwards. It's just gone forwards, if I remember rightly, isn't it?
13th, I think.
And we've just had the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction.
I had it back here.
Wrong. The third Jupiter-Pluto conjunction was on the 12th of November, and Mars going forwards.
So this is where we still, you know, it's almost like it seems like there's a lot of tension and build up, and then post-election it's like full.
Yeah, there's something that dark. There's something quite dark about it, though. Still, even though, it's quite for me. Even though Venus is in Libra, I think Liz has a point about Venus being so strong here. You haven't got Pallas Athena in your chart.
No,
I would
everything in because it's just too hard to grasp, I think.
Okay.
But you know, if you know where it is, you can say not in that sense, just to kind of visuals. I think putting everything in is too.
Okay, no, that's fine. But I just want to say that this is actually Diwali, and this is the Festival of Light. So this is, you know, so there is that hope in the darkness where everybody goes, okay, let's find our light within. It is Scorpio, you know, it is about life, death, and rebirth, and the rebirth of the light.
We're definitely moving towards that new Jupiter-Saturn 20-year cycle, aren't we here? You know, that there's a part of a whole chapter here has closed when Saturn move on, you know. We're left then with those last degrees of Pluto, you know.
We've just
the last 5
Mercury retrograde. We've just survived the last 3 weeks and what have you, or 4 weeks. So it is kind of looking up. So that's going to be a very interesting moon. And now we finish the year with 2 eclipses. Oh, well, not quite. There's another lunation, but 30th of November and the 14th of December. So this one is interesting, as you were talking about Antares and Aldebaran, Christos earlier, and Laura. This one's right on those as well.
Exactly.
This eclipse. So
Sorry.
I think this has to do with if we are going to feel the redemption. It has to do if we are going to feel that we have the ability to go forward. Because first of all, we have this opposition in the Aldebaran and Antares eclipse that is give all this energy, but at the same time, this square between Neptune and the nodes is about finding your redemption and learning from the mistakes and understand what you can do in order to move forward. Is like I've done some mistakes, I feel in pain because I've done all of this, but can I do a new start? Can I go forward? Can I do the appropriate initiation in order to go forward? And I think this is one of the main messages around this eclipse. But at the same time, it has multiple eclipses, because in the eclipse also we have Jupiter and Saturn through parallels and contra-parallels to also initiate things. Sun and Moon are in contra-parallel because of opposition also, but also we have Jupiter and Saturn. So this is, I think, the eclipse that says that the upcoming Jupiter conjunction is coming, and a new age also is in front of us.
It's dawning, right? So we just got to get past that Scorpio eclipse for things to look a bit better and brighter, it sounds like. I just wanted to add that yeah, the square of Neptune to the nodes is then going to kind of see us out into the rest of the year. So it's almost like we're in between the past and the future, but it's still not very clear. Like Neptune is like, it could be this, it still could be that. Like, what is it yet? It's almost like we have to trust with Neptune, don't we? We have to sort of let down some guard and really, let's say, dream up, you know,
Yeah.
what comes next. But
Yeah.
people don't believe in that. It's enough.
Can I just make one final comment on that? It's, of course, it's Trump's nodal axis, this. He has the sun there in, let me see, 22 Gemini on the node. So he's having his nodal return. And so he, you know, it's a worrying thought, but, you know, he can, as Lynn Bell said, he can ride the dragon, you know. So these forces he's unleashed there, he's able to ride them, you know. He's able to somehow, it's interesting that this nodal return is coming right on the back of the election, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, gosh. So that's
and sorry, just 3 days after this eclipse, on the 3rd of December, according to the Bradley technique on financial astrology, we have the lowest score of the year. So according the Bradley technique is about the most prominent financial situation or not. And in December the 2nd, it is going to be in its lowest phase for the next month, just 3 days after this eclipse.
right.
So there's kind of a drop in faith or something. Is that how you
Yes.
like the markets go, this is,
Yeah.
this is not what we wanted. Yeah. This, okay, that's interesting.
And
That's interesting.
I just,
But we're not,
oh, sorry, Laura, go.
I'm going to say we just, this is about information, isn't it? This is the moon and the Aldebaran and the North Node, and it's about getting the right information.
Mm.
And the, when is the actual date of the election? Is it the 3rd of November? When is
It is. I've got it. Well, I've got the chart coming up. I think it's the 3rd. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just looking at it thinking, well, is it that, you know, with all this information coming through, what kind of information is it that we've got the right information now? Is the right count coming out now?
Yeah.
Oh,
You know,
Well, with Neptune, we can say certainly no. We don't take the...
in your,
well, there is, well, yeah, when Neptune's at the bends is what we call it, isn't
Yeah.
it? When Neptune's at the bends,
Yeah.
it's difficult to tell what's going, you know, what is
Actually,
real and what isn't.
yeah.
But the moon is on Aldebaran. It's a bullseye. It's bang on in the middle. And you know, and it's coming from this heart of darkness, you know, this Antares, this like place where it's actually shining. So the Antares is shining onto this moon, which is saying, this is the bullseye, this is bang on, and it's the information, and it's our way forward with the North Node there.
And there is an old theory that the exaltation degree of the moon is where the bullseye is, not a fixed point. So probably, according to the Babylonians, the modern exaltation degree of the moon is exactly on the Aldebaran in the 8th degree and the 9th degree of Gemini.
That would make so much sense, wouldn't it? Because it's also with the Venus transits, it's what goes crossing over the sun every
Yeah, it's all that hot spot. That is a real hot spot, actually, and it has been because of Venus retrograde this year too.
One more hot spot, actually, just before we move on, Liz, sorry, darling, is that if I remember rightly, I don't really do that much mundane astrology myself anymore, but isn't that an important point in the US chart? Isn't that their Uranus or something, 8 degrees of Gemini?
Yeah, I think it is actually. Yeah. No, it's 21 degrees Gemini. It's the ascendant is in 12. Oh no, you're right. It is in 8 degrees Gemini. That's absolutely right. Sorry, Laura.
Because for some way it was activated in the 9/11 also.
Right.
The axis, something happened there in the 9/11. Yeah.
Right. That's true.
It's interesting, isn't it? Oh gosh, this is looking more Trumpian all the time.
Change. The people are changing then. Are we looking at some sort of like dramatic change for the people?
Well, you'd think so.
Yeah, you hope so, don't you? Because you know, you want you know, we all love America too.
I know.
We want it to do well, you know. It's really sad to see what's going on there at the moment. It's really, really hard to see.
I just bring up this this anvil that Laura and I remember we researched when we were together last year.
Gosh.
It was an anvil in the sky, and we thought, what is this? You know, you can see this red line pattern here, and it's called an anvil. So it's made up of a square, sesqui-square, which is a 135 degree on both sides, and then an opposition. And so it's made of squares. It's not, you know, it's almost like we're building something again. And you know what started around that time of this anvil in the sky last April or just before was the Extinction Rebellion. Have like an X symbol as their sign. And we were just like, oh, wow.
That's cool.
We might see that rise up a lot stronger. Is it still going in London, the Extinction Rebellion?
Yeah, they're still going, definitely. Yeah, I saw something about them the other day. I didn't read it, but they're still there.
It's a little bit sad because some of the actions haven't worked, and they've created a bit of negativity in as much as, and now the Home Secretary is trying to make it a criminal organization.
Wow.
So it's okay to do all this. It's okay for fossil fuels to go and, you know, pollute the planet. But if you want to say, please stop polluting the planet, you become a criminal. Poor old Extinction Rebellion. But I still think that there's life in it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was the way it was framed as well, the way they framed it, you know, as a nuisance and annoyance. The British press is quite powerful, you know,
very.
Public opinion.
But stop traffic, or, you know, like, you know, really, they're not going to pay attention. Social media is even going through this big overhaul as well. People don't trust things anymore. It hasn't got the voice that it did in, you know, this sort of hot spot for a while. It's kind of lost its flavor a lot. I think that's a lot to do with the Gemini as well. We're kind of re-looking at ways to get better and better communication and, let's say, intelligence about what's really going on. You know, there's always an update to that, though, isn't there? We always have to update that. We cannot just say, okay, that's the truth out there. So, but that's the Gemini thing. It's like always update. Keep being updated somehow. But stop looking at your phone all the time.
My fear with this eclipse is that first we are going to have in Europe for certain problem with you know, illegal trespass of the frontiers. How you call that? I don't know.
Borders.
Yes. Yeah. We are going to have huge problem right there, and this T-square is about fanaticism, because when I don't know the proper information, when there is all this blurry situation with this Neptune forming this T-square, and Sag is a sign of fanaticism if it's not, if you don't have the correct information. So maybe religious fanaticism, fanaticism about the ideas, how you deal with people, how you deal with all those poor people that they want to survive, passing your own country. I think this is going to be a big problem for Europe and for the Western world.
Yeah, well, it certainly shows the borders are the most, important thing, and the Neptune for sure. Oh my goodness. Mars with Eris still, I mean, that's a signature ongoing. And here we have these two edging away to Aquarius, hey? This is where that will be a solar eclipse, of course, at 23, oh, hang on, where am I on? 23 Sag, and it will be visible over South America. But as Agent 72 always reminds us, eclipse lines aren't just about where it is visible. They spread out their tentacles, and pretty much it's going up here, and up here as well. So in a sense, it does, let's say, overshadow Europe and North America as well. Not overshadow, you know what I mean. It sort of spreads out to that realm. So now this is, of course, the chart for the Capricorn ingress, and we don't have to talk about this much because it actually starts the next 3 months. Okay, and we've got a few other things to go on with, but let's just kind of finish this segment with Saturn and Jupiter meet on the equinox. These are on the solstice. It's pretty much just on the same day, just a few degrees apart. It's jumping around. 3 hours later is Saturn and Jupiter conjunction. And I mean, when I saw this, it's almost like it does brighten what we've just looked at. What do you think?
Can I just say, I'm actually quite confident from the autumn equinox, the September equinox chart. I think it's promising, right?
It is.
I really do. There are some shocks and horrors along the way for sure, but I think it's promising.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's a new age. It's a new start.
It's a new.
This is definitely a new start. This is fantastic.
Yeah, and
but a new start of what? Because don't forget, we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Well, it's called a Maverick conjunction in the early 80s, which really sort of kicked off the whole Reagan, the whole.
From a mundane point of view, that was the new world.
Well, something new is not always something good, but it is something new.
This feels very, I mean, like if we look at all the apps that have suddenly come out to trace COVID and, all these new technologies that are coming in, innovative technologies, that's really interesting. What's going to happen in that area? What is technology going to do in the next 20 years? We've reached a point now where it got a little bit scary. Is it going to be more freedom? This Aquarius, it should be more humane, more friendly, more user-friendly, and less Big Brother is watching you, which is very Saturn Pluto, right? I mean, I think there was a bit creepy this year sometimes with the technology, with this sort of Saturn Pluto.
There was a great documentary in Netflix just before some days was released about how social media and how the algorithms are changing our perspective in society.
Exactly.
And that even the algorithm of YouTube is creating problems within society, and people fight each other because they take the information they want, but they're not the true information. So everyone constructs his own reality according to his own beliefs and information. So this is going to be, of course, hard.
This is the quantum leap we've made, though, isn't it, into this new age? We have to learn how to use it. It's still a new toy, really.
thought, just following on from that, when the lamas talk about, you know, the Tibetan lamas, when they talk about achieving success on very difficult subjects, they always suggest that we think long term. You know, we can't expect to have things fixed immediately, especially when we're looking at the Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. You know, this is a collective sign, and it's going to take 180 to 200 years for the great chronometer to actually play out, for this whole air sign meetup between Jupiter and Saturn to actually come to its cycle, go through its cycle. So we have to think long term. We have to think long term about teaching people how to raise the altruistic intention, which is really important for anything Aquarian, so that we can actually generate that humanitarian energy when it's needed, and how to work cooperatively to actually build and make. And it's not just all about robots. It's not just all about AI, and it's not just all about surveillance. Although those things seem like it now. And the thing is that it's also happening in a metal year, Chinese style. So Saturn in Aquarius in a metal year, that actually gives us more space. It gives, you know, it gives authority more space to actually consider what it needs to be done, what needs to be done in order to, I know that it's kind of, sometimes I think that, you know, when I talk about raise, it's about intention. You know, intention is all. And, you know, even if the result isn't what we wanted, setting the intention is the most important thing. So if we can set the intention that the great chronometer, that the great mutation is about actually setting the altruistic higher vibration of Aquarius, not forgetting actually that from an esoteric point of view, the moon is actually exalted, and she's the hierarchical rulership is Aquarius of the moon. So it's about us all living together happily, using our resources, you know, hopefully not the negative aspect of it.
The moon in Pisces tells us that there, and that's actually the exaltation degree of Venus, isn't it? We've got to learn to get along. Don't we know that yet? You know, anyway, that's a big story, and I think with the CIA we'll probably do another panel just on that topic, because I know this astrology,
it really is.
There's so much to say about this amazing new cycle. Saturn, Jupiter are known as our, let's say, social planets that put together the structure of our societies, so that it's very, very significant about what we're moving into, being in Aquarius. And Aquarius does have so many of the humanitarian wonderful aspects, as Laura was saying, but there's also what we've seen just in that brief episode of Saturn into Aquarius briefly, is that high surveillance and government control about everything we do, and that is kind of scary. And now there's going to be more satellites and drones on everything. Like Melbourne's just had their experience of lockdown, like one of the strictest in the world. And there's drones flying around. There's all kinds of stuff. You know, like seriously, this is Melbourne. I mean, this is Australia, and that is very, very disconcerting if this is the new age that we're kind of moving into. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, again, lots to sort of say about that. But listen, I know we're going. How are you guys for time? Are you still okay?
I'm okay.
You sure?
Yeah.
Happy to. What's happened here? Oh, sorry, I've got to.
I still got my thing.
Okay. So Liz has prepared a few things for us. So let's go over to Liz. There's a lot to say, guys. If you have to come back and look at this another time, just do. It will remain on our Facebook page here, or it will be on our YouTube channel. Just our website is close to being back. So pray with us as Venus is on the secret agent degree. It's any day now I can make the announcement. But for now, over to Liz as we look at some of the political charts in the highlight over the next few months.
Okay, So can you see my screen then? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let me see.
Yep.
I want to go up to the top here. Let's do that. Okay. So I'm going to try and run quite quickly through it because we've already said a lot. So this is the harvest season. This is my take on the equinox time of year in the Northern Hemisphere. It's a time of reaping what we have sown, basically. And I think on many levels at the moment, with regard to our planet, we are certainly in this sort of major reaping season. I mean, Capricorn, Saturn, the Grim Reaper, you know, the sort of chips are down in some way. Equinox, it's saying something very fundamental about the earth and the sun. It's an aspect of balance in relationship, but we are also moving from a waxing cycle into the waning half of the year. So it's a time of reflection, and it's a time which we've been given this year, by the way, with all these Saturn planets. You know, a time to sort of reflect and stop and stand still and take stock of things, which is in its way a gift, okay? So we have a lot to weigh up. I mean, we've had Saturn-Pluto, only one hit in January. We've had the 3-time Jupiter-Pluto cycle. And we've got this, of course, this new Jupiter-Saturn cycle coming in. So what struck me, this here is the Libra ingress. We've done a lot on this, so I don't want to stay here. But what I do want to draw attention to, again, is the importance of Venus in this chart. Venus is going to be hooking up with the moon and Mars. She's ruling Venus. She's ruling the sun. She's ruling Mercury. She's ruling the midheaven in the horoscope of the US. Moon here in Sag is on the ascendant of the US. So it's a time to galvanize, I think, the female vote in the UK, in the US. So yeah, we see the sun unaspected there, which has a rogue quality to it. And when I was looking at the chart, I was very mindful of that wonderful speech in Game of Thrones when Littlefinger is saying chaos is a ladder. I mean, we've seen this in 1930s Germany. When you whip up chaos, there's always then the possibility of putting yourself forward as the person who's going to fix it. Oldest trick in the book. We shouldn't be fooled by it. And as Littlefinger points out, you know, many fall, but there are those who can climb the ladder. So we have this Yod to Venus, very spiritual aspect, the Yod. It's one of these sort of Hebrew letters. So there's a lot to be gained at the moment, I think, from a female approach to things. We've seen it with COVID. We've seen it in a lot of ways, that imbalance male-female. This is one of the things that we really collectively need to start addressing. Plus 6 cardinals in this chart. So there's a great urge and a sort of willingness to get things done. So I was looking at the Britain leaves the EU chart because we're getting finally into that last phase now of the negotiation process. We're in the birth channel, if you like. And when I looked at the 31st of January 2020 against the Libra ingress of the sun, what really struck me is that time pretty much has stood still here. If we look at Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn down there at the bottom of this chart, well, yeah, there's hardly, I mean, Saturn's in exactly the same degree. Pluto's moved a little bit. Jupiter's more or less the same. We've got now Mars with the moon. So there is that frozen quality about this year, which is, again, it's winter season in the Northern Hemisphere. When things freeze, they sort of, they're still for a moment. And it's that strange sort of experience that I felt certainly in Amsterdam this year, of it being emptied of people, emptied of purpose. The city centre in Amsterdam is basically one big, you know, shopping experience. And when the tourists fall away, there's nothing there for the people that live really in Amsterdam. So these shopping streets, which I delighted to walk down because it was just so surreal. So this year we have like a long stay of Mars in Aries. It was Dane Rudhyar who drew attention to the importance of these long stays. This is where Mars hangs out in a sign for the whole of his retrograde duration. He doesn't back up into the previous sign. So this is a very important sort of long stay, and always is important when you look at the chart of the US, because it's in the 4th house of the Sibley chart. I use the Sibley chart. I know there's a lot of opposition to it, but I think there's good arguments for using it. and anyone in my mind can use what they like, because there isn't just one chart. A nation evolves, but I'm with Sibley all the way. Mars, 4th house. What did we see in the 1941-42 long stay? We had Pearl Harbor and America entering the US. In the July 1862 to January 1863 long stay, we had the Battle of Antietam in the American Civil War, which to this day remains the highest count of wounded, dead, or missing in American US military history. That's quite a figure, 22,717 total. And both these events were happening when Mars was positioned between 15 and 18 degrees of Aries, opposite US Saturn in the 10th house. And what we saw this year when Mars was at that point, which it was in half July, early August, we had the deployment of the federal police force in Portland. We had the use of unmarked cars. We had officers in camouflage who weren't carrying identification badges, and it generated basically a national outcry. So here's a picture here, which is from the BBC News website on July the 18th of federal agents here making an arrest. And what is really striking, I think, as well, is we know when Pluto walks among men, he wears the mask or the helmet of invisibility. And there's something about, since Pluto's been in Capricorn, there's been an issue all the time about face coverings, whether it be burqas, whether it be, you know, rioters wearing masks, and now, you know, we're all wearing masks. It's a very, very strange sort of synchronicity, planetary synchronicity. So another time I think that's going to be really tense with regard to Mars in this long stay will be the time around the Pluto station on October the 4th and the time around the Mars station on November the 14th. So Mars direct, Mars retrograde, this is a midpoint between the horoscope drawn, a combi horoscope for the midpoint between the Mars turning retrograde and the Mars direct. And again, we can see it's a chart that's completely honing in onto this Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto energy, which we've already talked really a lot about. It's that sort of, you know, we've got to kind of somehow just get through this. It's that sort of withdrawal that we can feel when it's really cold and everything shuts down. We have to sit with it, and it's very, very tense energy, I think. So these are some dates in this Mars retro period, which I think is worth putting up. You'll be able to see them. I'll put them all up now, and then you'll be able to run through them if you want to later. But there's the Mars retro there. Important will be that Mars retro square on the day that Saturn goes direct, stations direct. That's kind of tying into Pluto stations. Pluto stations are always huge. I mean, this is Pluto putting all his weight down somewhere. And the first time I actually noticed a Pluto station, and I've been following it since, and also past history, was there was one of these Hajj events in Saudi Arabia, and there was a massive stampede with an enormous loss of life. And this was a Pluto station. So these Pluto stations, they have something very weighty about them. And so that's an interesting time there. The Mars retro square to Jupiter, we have that new moon, which we've already talked about, and all this kind of build up really to the November the 3rd election. Yeah, it's quite a cardinal fest, if you like. So Mars in Aries, this is something just a little thing I did on Facebook, because what I've noticed as well is what we have as society, a real issue with handling and using constructively, is anger. Anger has been turned into something that is framed and used in a political way to the benefit of either side. Both people can frame it and use it. But there is such a thing as righteous anger. And if we look at, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement and the, you know, the prison system and the disproportionate amount of Black people in prison and the whole system with regard to Black Americans, it calls up a certain degree of righteous anger and indignation, but it hasn't got any kind of outlet at all. So this is something I am pondering on this Mars retrograde, is this idea that it's not only a destructive force, it's also an instrument of truth. And there's an honesty in righteous anger, and it demands to be heard as well. And what we're doing now is, you know, pulling statues down or defacing property, expressing anger, even if it's righteous, has been framed as riotous, etc. And, you know, you're going to go to prison, etc. So it's a strange thing that we do not have any outlet in our system for anger, and that's problematic, because anger builds up if it hasn't got an outlet, and then you do get revolutions and things happening. So Mars in Sag, these long stays, I just want to point out one of the previous long stays, which was this one in Sagittarius, which was between February and September 2001. So Mars retrograde has, I think, a possible link to plotting acts of violence or terrorism. It can have that sort of brewing up quality, sitting on anger, you know, sort of brooding on it, letting it fester inwardly. So in 2001, Mars did a long stay in Sagittarius and incidentally stationed retrograde conjunct Chiron on the galactic center on May the 11th. The galactic center is a highly intense spot. Saturn, I think the last Saturn-Uranus conjunction was on the galactic center. It's a chaotic spot there. It's kind of quite, yeah, there's all these stars vying for life, and it's a real sort of, yeah, hotbed. So we know as well that this Mars was engaging with Pluto and opposing Saturn across the ascendant-descendant axis, descendant house of open enemies, of course. And after a 6-month stay in Sagittarius, Mars entered Capricorn on September the 8th, which was just 3 days before the 9/11 attacks. So Mars in Sag is definitely a long stay, these long stays, because Mars is hanging out for 6 months then in a sign instead of, you know, 2 or 6 weeks sometimes. He's doing something. He's at work there. So this again, US with the Libra ingress of the Sun. I think this it is being framed as the most important election in the generation, and in many ways I think that is the case, because the US is now finally coming in here to its Pluto return. It's also coming into the Neptune opposition phase. So there's this T-square as well from Neptune opposition to Mars in the 7th house there. So yeah, these cycles in the US, particularly the Pluto return, it's all sort of kind of hanging now around this last quarter of this coming year. This is the US secondary progressed horoscope. And if we look at the secondary progressed moon, which is down here, I've circled it, I find it quite interesting that the moon there as well, over the past months, through the killing of George Floyd, you know, again, the surge in Black Lives Matter, coming up here through the through the transiting planets in Capricorn, that portal, if you like, and then it has to cross over Pluto, and then on the 29th of October, this secondary progressed moon moves into Aquarius, which around the time of the election, of course, it will be 1 degree. So it's very close to the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction of December, when that moon shifts sign and the election takes place. So there's a kind of a shifting mood maybe as the moon moves into Aquarius. Very important planet, of course, for the US chart, ruler of the sun if you use Sibley. And you know, the Venus there is very noticeable. That Venus in ruling the midheaven of the US chart has just recently moved sign, and it's moved into her home sign, Taurus. So if there is if there was ever a time in US politics where the female energy needs to rise up, needs to let itself be heard and seen, I think that moment really is now too. Since late August 2019, secondary progressed ruler of the US 10th house, Saturn is also in Libra. We see Venus entering Taurus. So there's been a lot of things going on in the US. There were a run of female candidates for president. None of them made it, but we have got Kamala Harris, of course, now as Biden's running mate. But we had on January the 15th, Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat. Marianne Williamson, I thought was interesting, billed as a sort of a new age candidate, but now supporting the Democrats. We have Elizabeth Warren, Democrat, Amy Klobuchar, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Democrat. None of them made it, as I said, but we have got Kamala Harris, which is, you know, a plus point for the women, I think, in the US. What we also saw then, you know, as this change was taking place, we had the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein, which again gives the Me Too movement a huge push forward again, great impetus. We had Greta Thunberg arriving in the States and leading these demos across the US, highlighting climate change, because there are serious issues with our planet at the moment. When we think of Aquarius, when we talk about the age of Aquarius, this area of the sky there, you know, it's the great celestial sea, and more water is becoming a serious concern. Just this week, an enormous piece of one of these last ice sheets in Greenland fell away. So we can, you know, this rethink that we've had, this reset button with all these planets in Capricorn that we've been afforded this year, I think each of us individually has to think about and do our little bit, if you like, towards helping our planet along a bit, because I think we, you know, there are problems here, definite problems. And then we had, of course, the Gabby Giffords March for Our Lives calling for changes to gun laws. So this is Kamala Harris, Biden's running mate for 2020. Just wanted to bring in her chart because her Saturn is conjunct US moon, and as we saw, progressed moon is moving into Aquarius. She is as well, she has a bundle of planets around Neptune in the 9th. You know, the US has always had this vision of itself, you know, if you look at the seal, the Great Seal, this new order of ages coming in, it's always had a visionary quality, a religious fanaticism, maybe Puritanism as well. So there's something very connected with this Venus to Neptune there. And I think what's interesting as well is that she is trining, the sun there is trining the US moon and sextiling Mars. So she can kind of maybe, you know, through this opposition that she has as a colored woman in the US reaching this high office, she can do something to bring the people through that Saturn together. You know, this is the age of maybe of women coming more into politics as opposed to, you know, older men. This is the chart for the election for 2020. This is for the opening. Although this year, I think actually this chart might be redundant because so many people have reverted to postal votes, and astrologers are really, you know, you could maybe I could have looked at when the postal vote went in, but still, this is when you can go to the polling booth. You know, one of the thoughts I had earlier on this year with regard to the long stay of Mars was maybe the election might even be put off. But colleagues in the US has assured me that wouldn't happen. But it's an election like no other, that's for sure. The moon in Gemini, of course, in Donald Trump's sign, around the descendant as well of the US natal chart. So hopefully, I say moon in Gemini, you know, that's kind of quite a buzzy energy. And it's trine Venus as well in Libra here. So I'm kind of really hoping that the women voters don't let the side down. Also want to mention on the note of Jupiter-Saturn, the presidential death cycle, which is something that, you know, most astrologers are aware of. This has been going on, I think, since the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions moved into Earth, beginning of the 19th century. Certainly for the last 200 years, the astrologers have been elected according to Campion and Harvey, but I have heard astrologers say inaugurated. In the year of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, they either die in office or are assassinated or survive attempted assassinations. There are a few exceptions. There's Thomas Jefferson, George W. Bush, and James Monroe. So there have been a few, but a few famous names in this list would be Abe Lincoln, William McKinley, Roosevelt, Kennedy, and of course Reagan, who was shot but managed to survive. So yeah, that's interesting when we look, for example, at somebody, you know, like these candidates this year. These men are very old. I think Joe Biden is probably the oldest candidate ever. I think he is 78. Although he is reportedly in very good health, he is running a very low-key campaign. So yeah, that's unaspected in the ingress chart for the autumn equinox. Yeah, he needs to, you know, really, you know, push his female candidate forward. This is Donald Trump and the US election of 3rd November. And I think, as I said, it's really interesting that Trump is really tying into, of course, this nodal, it's his nodal return he's having here. So this is a kind of quite a scary feel to it, because of course Trump is born on eclipse. He can ride the dragon. He is able to climb the ladder as Littlefinger said. He is not, you know, not adverse to some chaos. And look at US Neptune there, right? US Neptune is radix Neptune at 22 plus. That means it's 22 degrees something Virgo. And it's kind of square Trump's of a T-square going on here. And some of the stuff that's been circulated through sites like QAnon and you know, other groups, the idea of, you know, there be devils, you know, and they're in, you know, politicians, and, you know, the idea of cannibal pedophile rings. I mean, some of it is just so you know, so Neptunian and so deluded. I think many Europeans here hang their heads and think, what is happening there? But some of these sort of conspiracy theories and sites, you know, I say QAnon, they are really, really big in the US, really big. Then we have a look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden, his moon is there, the moon there at the opening of the certainly the election proper, shall we say, you know, the election booths in Dixville. The moon is with his Saturn there. So you know, that is, you know, is that a good sign or not? Is he, you know, what's his own Saturn? It's in his 7th house, so he's got an angular Saturn, you know, so that's good in itself. I mean, it's he's also got a daytime chart, so the moon there, you know, it could mean that people come out for the old man. The moon secondary progressed US chart has just shifted allegiance. It's moved into Aquarius as well. Venus is in his 10th house. Venus is often a sign of victory, you know, so this is hopeful as well. There's some hope here for Biden, and he has got this female running mate who I think he should make the absolute most of. So the results in the past, the results have come out usually. Last previous election, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, but I think it was Laura who pointed out that given the whole complexity of the votes this time round, it's very unlikely, I would imagine, indeed, that by 3 or 4 in Washington, you know, the result will be clearly known. But it's really interesting how close this moon is here. It's a full moon to Trump. He's the moon, of course, in Sag, this nodal return that he's having there, and it's in his 10th house. So these are the kinds of things that, as an astrologer, I find, you know, they kind of give me a kind of a feeling of, oh no. The inauguration 2021, so this is my final slide here. I mean, is it a contested result, or is it a contested result? We see here Mars with Uranus squaring, Jupiter squaring, Saturn squaring the Sun. So, and, you know, just flicking back a little bit to the US Neptune, which one was that there, you know, caught up in this whole kind of T-square thing that's going on here. You know, it's a kind of a strange looking inauguration as well, even though we've just had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I think what's really interesting, as I said about Kamala Harris, I think what the US needs at the moment with secondary progressed Venus in Taurus it needs female at the top there that will at least try to bring sides together, that will try and unite the country as opposed to sew them apart. Because really that great American eclipse, which was only a few years ago, you know, these are big eclipses. If we remember the one in the UK, the Nostradamus 1999 Grand Cross eclipse, which was visible across the UK, which seemed to be a bit of a dud at the time with regard to the UK. You know, what we find at that time, an unknown politician called Nigel Farage, he stood up in, he's just been elected to the European Parliament, and he stood up there and said, my job is to get Britain out of the EU. Well, here we are. In other words, just like Saturn Pluto throws a massive, massive, massive shadow, these eclipses have an effect because they seed things. So that was a very, very dodgy eclipse for the US. And I think, you know, as an astrologer, if I was advising now, I'd be saying, get a female in there and try and get some kind of conciliatory energy moving through the chart. Okay, so Julia, that was me.
Thanks, Liz. If only they would listen more to us.
Yeah.
And get some women in there for sure.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah, there's a lot to consider. It's a very what you said about the long stay in Sagittarius in 2001, that was so interesting, makes so much sense about what happened, which so then kind of, you know, are the Mars retrograde cycles or long stays in fire signs, you know, they're the ones to kind of watch the most. But anyway, look, we better move on because we're nearly at the hour mark, and I didn't expect to take so long, but hey, it's the equinox and there's a lot to talk about. And so we'll go off to, I'm going to share my screen for Christos now. And hang on, where'd it go? Here we go. Let's go back. And Christos, they've been waiting for you on the chat. Do you know that?
It's okay. I try to be fast forward in order not to people feel that they're already tired.
So
and
we replay the time slots in, so if someone's particularly interested in a particular subject, you can kind of skip ahead. So just go for it, mate.
Okay, the first thing that I wanted to talk about is about the psychological perspective, about how we are going to react as individuals, because we talk about the mundane level, but I wanted to talk about the astropsychological level too. So I think the main problem with this period is that there is a lack of clarity. There is a lack of understanding and of better looking what really happens to our charts, to our lives, what really happens in our own decisions. So we've started with all these planetary cycles at the end of December, in the beginning of January 2021. All this has to do with the age of fear, because of this Saturn-Pluto conjunction was about fear, was about control, was about going against the democratic principles, the principles of freedom, how we are going to react to all this oppressive situation, not just from the governments, but also from the situations. We had the COVID-19 disease, we had several problems at the end of 2019, 2020. Don't forget, we have all of these disastrous catastrophe that happened in Australia with the fires. It was really, for me, terrifying, all this that happened to a whole country and a continent. And I think that in 2020, what we had to do was how to control and how to communicate with our fears, how to understand what really happened and how we can really get off from this situation. And the most, I think, problematic situation that starts with the equinox is about the emotional and physical starvation, how we feel starved through our emotions. And it's not just about the moon, but also Ceres and all the planetary combinations that begin in the 22nd of September 2020 has to do with all this need to be loved, the need to feel the emotions, the need to feel that I belong somewhere to someone. And don't forget the immigrant problem. A lot of people lost their houses and they're continuing losing their houses. A lot of people are like peregrine planets that do not have somewhere to lean. Already before some days we had a terrible disaster in Moria, a region in an island in Greece. The immigrants themselves burned down the facility because, of course, the situation was really problematic. Okay, there was a choice of being in a prison-like situation or getting out. So this is always about getting freedom. And what I'm saying always about all these planetary cycles and the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that is going to happen at the end of this year in December 2020 is that we are always fighting for something that has to do with what is freedom, what is democracy, and how we can really secure all these things. Because in the Western world, we say that this is something we have it already in our life, but we can see that the governments or even people, they try to manipulate things. They try to misinform the people, and all this misinformation and this Neptune square with the North Node that we are going to feel in the end of this period is about not feeling secure and hearing a lot of voices. And of course, this is not just about the outburst, the emotional outburst that we're going to feel. This Mars is going to form an eighth harmonic with the Saturn, with Aries, with Pluto, with Jupiter. This is going to form with Ceres later on in November. This Mars is about being angry, because I cannot find what is true, I cannot find what really happens, and in my personal life, I'm not happy. And we can see that especially people that want really to express themselves, they don't know what to do. And this new moon that happens in 6th of October 2020 is exactly on Aries, but also in Pluto and Saturn. And we have Sun also energizes all this energy that has to do with problematic situation in relationships. Don't forget that Sun is going to be in Libra. Libra is about relationships, and all this is about being starved by looking to find emotions and the real communication with the others, because we are going to feel alone. It's not just about being in isolation because of the laws to protect ourselves from COVID. It's about real isolation, having someone near us and feeling alone. We had a 25% increase in Greece in divorces during March to May 2020 because people found alone within their partners, and they already understood that I am with a stranger and I don't want him near me, especially being isolated by COVID with someone that he doesn't love me and he doesn't really like me, or I don't love him and or don't love her. All this situation, all this isolation, all this phenomenal happiness, but it's not true. And this is what is about 2020, finding clarity and finding what really happens to our emotions. And this Mars transit that is going to do all these squares and all of these aspects is about stopping all of these mambo jumbo situation that we all live in our lives and finding our truth, that perhaps we are alone and we really need to do something else. We really need to understand that our life is something more than spending our time with people that we do not really love. And then I think we should not forget that this Mercury is going retrograde in the water signs. We can see that it's going to help us understand to do what the hero is always doing when Mercury is going retrograde, is going to the underworld. All the heroes in the mythology, not just the Greek mythology, but in all of the mythologies in the world, have to go to the underworld in order to initiate a new start. So when Mercury goes retrograde in the watery signs around those years, is about going to the underworld realm of our emotions, and we really have to look closer to our emotional turbulences, our passions, but also our obsessions. And the problem is that usually people that they have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, in a Mercury transit in a water sign, and especially Scorpio being retrograde, we are going to have problems with obsessiveness and OCD and wanting to have control, because usually a disorder comes up when the self is not in a situation to have control in his life. So here is a disorder in order to have some kind of control. Every disorder is about the self losing control. And this Mercury going retrograde in the watery signs is about, I'm losing my control. I need to go to the underworld. I need to go to the subconscious in order to understand what really happens to my life, what I can do in order to fight all this loneliness and these dark images of my future that other people project to me, although none asked me. And this is the important situation of Uranus. This Uranus is about the revolutionary ideas that you need to go outside your box and your material happiness, because Uranus in Aries this is going to be the breakdown of your material happiness. But you need to understand that there is a happiness much more original that has to do with emotions. And this Mars and all these new moon and full moon phases that are going to happen are about aggressiveness. So unfortunately, we are going to see all this aggressiveness going within. Again, Mars is retrograde, and this aggressiveness is going against ourselves, is about attacking our own interests, attacking our own selves. Our immune systems are going to attack ourselves. This is where always we have psychosomatic problems. So people that they have problematic emotional situations, they don't feel well, or they have probably some difficulty in feeling well, they may have some problems in their bodies, because when we are not okay within ourselves, and this Mars retrograde is going to multiply all this, we are going to have all this increase in psychosomatic situation. And of course, this full moon forming a conjunction with Uranus, I think is going to bring a lot of problems with hysteria and histrionic disorder, personality disorder. And hysteria means that I crave for attention, but also I crave for being finally secure emotionally. And this Uranus formation of aspects with the full moon and all this Uranian information that we're going to take around November is about getting out from the prison. But we should remember that getting out from the prison may not be the perfect way, because we may have just to ask, may I go out finally from the prison? Because the only real prison lockers are ourselves, and this is going to be revealed during November. We are the ones that we secluded ourselves and we cannot go out. So we can just ask from ourselves, can I go out? Can I breathe? Can I do a new beginning? Can I do a new start? And this is the most important phenomenon. Of course, at the end of November, with all this Saturn and Pluto situation, this is always a period of depression. Usually countries that are really north or really south, you have even more or less light during that period. So you have to look closer what really happens in your life. Depression is something that is going to go around at the end of November. But what I think is important is that this new moon in the 23rd degree of Scorpio is about agena, and agena is about the pain of learning. the pain of understanding that I need to go forward. I learn my mistakes, I understand my weaknesses, and finally I can do something more in my life. So now I will go to finish with European Union, and I'm going to be really short. I'm not going to tell you more. So looking at the European Union chart, we can understand some really fascinating things. First of all, we can see that right now, the progressed moon is on the 19th degree of Taurus and is going slowly to form later on a full moon. And this full moon is going to be an eclipse for European Union. For me is fascinating because looking at the progressed chart of the European Union is like that something that started in 1993 now can really be formed and can really be changed. Of course, all of the full moon and new moons around the Uranus is going also to activate the natal sun of the Treaty of 1993 for the European Union in Brussels was in the 8th degree of Scorpio, 32 minutes. And we are going to have this Uranian new moon and full moon situation that is going to change the way the European Union is working. A lot of astrologers in Greece believe that this is going to be the destruction of the European Union. I think has to do first with the Great Britain going finally outside what we call now European Union, but also a formation of a more imperialistic, a more, let's say, aggressive European Union later on. I'm not saying that this is for the good or for the bad of the peoples. I'm saying that we are talking about a slowly militarization of European Union, a formal state from now on, because it has to deal with a lot of enemies around, but also with a lot of problems. Unfortunately, the solar eclipse that is going to be formed at the end of December 2020, with the square with Neptune and with the North Node being very, very powerful around this era, this is going to hit on the 5th and 11th house of European Union and has to do with creativity and how we deal with the children of European Union. I think that we are going to lose some of our democratic principles. That's why I'm always saying that 2020 is try not to lose yourself through fear. And unfortunately, all the states, not just European Union, United States and various countries in the world, because of fear, they are going to take back some very important democratic and freedom principles. So we are going to feel the change, the transformation of European Union in a more something like controlled state. And of course, European Union is already a financial state. And when financial situations come in the middle, that means that you're going to protect your financial prosperity by any means. And by talking by any means, I mean that this is going to change rapidly what is going to happen later on. On the other side, Uranus is going to bring even more changes to the progress chart of European Union. Mercury, Venus and Pluto right now are in Scorpio, and Mercury on the 16th degree, Venus on the 23rd degree, exactly in conjunction with the full moon, in the new moon that happens in November. And of course, with Pluto, progressed Pluto is right now in the 25th degree of Scorpio, and it's forming an exact conjunction, of course, already in the natal chart. The natal Pluto is forming a conjunction with natal Uranus. So I think it is about manipulation, is about slowly becoming like a secret or dark empire, like the scenario in the Star Wars. So I should say that we should be really careful later on, because we are going to have all of these difficulties, having a European Union that is going to lose herself for the next years and becoming more like a European imperium in order to have the control of the various riches and things that we may want in Middle East, in Africa, and etc. We have already seen the Macron and France chart already forms a colonial policy that comes back like being in the 1990s and 1920s and 1930s. So I think that European Union is going to be more global from now on. And as I said, this is going to bring more tensions to the world. This is not going to ease the situations. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Christos. Wow. That was great. There's a lot of great comments in the Facebook you'll have to have a little look at later. Just there's that, what do you call it, Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. So, we, you know, of course, it's going through that in the next month or, 2 months or whatever, a return of that Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. How do you think, like you talked earlier about the immigration issues with so many countries, teeming and dealing with the rising sort of amount of people needing aid and help and a place to live. Thanks for bringing that up, because we complain about things like in, Melbourne, the most livable city on the planet, they say. I don't know why really, but in this lockdown when there's just major other stuff going on everywhere else, so it's like, how do you think the union will deal with all its needs?
Well, right now,
else?
Greece is exactly on the borders with the outside world. So
Yeah.
as long as Greece is the good boy and it protects the borders, everything is fine. But talking bluntly, we cannot control all of these people. We cannot stop all of these people coming to European Union.
Wow.
And we know that we are going to have environmental disasters in Africa and Middle East. We are going to have even more problems with the policies of United States, Russia, into the internal situation of countries around Africa and Middle East. That is going to bring even more starvation and problems for surviving to these countries. So even more immigrants. So this is an endless problem that is going to be huge for Europe. And of course, this is one of the reasons that Turkey is using as a blackmail situation in order to do what I want. Otherwise, I'm going to bring millions of immigrants to your countries. And this is a way in order to control things. Yeah. So the immigration problem is going to be huge for Europe. It's going to be huge for United States. And we already know that Trump wanted to do this huge wall like we are in the medieval ages. The problem is that even if we accept those immigrants, I'm very liberal, I'm very open person, okay? I'm not saying anything bad, but even if we accept them, we do not heal the problem. The problem is stop stealing the things from those countries, stop doing problems to these countries, try to help them build their countries, and we will not going to have immigration.
Yeah, exactly. Feed the starving. There's plenty of food, as we're told all the time, there's plenty to go around on this planet. And that's the Aquarian age we want to kind of move into, share the bounty. Mm-hmm. Like there's plenty of it. And yeah, it's all just, managed by corporations and Sorry, Liz?
It's that idea of one world, one planet. I mean, since we saw our planet with that moon mission in the 60s, with this little tiny globe hanging there in space, we can do a better global management. But thank you really, Christos, for mentioning a few things you mentioned. The fires in America, which is as well Mars in Aries in the 4th as well, which definitely, and also what happened in Moria a week or so ago, which is absolutely shocking, that people have to live in conditions like that, And I mean, any moral ground that the EU had, it's lost, because it is dangling now actually on the lip of Erdogan in Turkey, which, is absolutely not where you want to be, because this guy is himself, as bad as any other dictator anywhere. So I just think, we have to stop what you said, absolutely spot on. We have to stop mucking these countries up and take responsibility for what we've done in the past, Britain, Belgium, the way we split up Africa. we have created this problem, and now especially Britain, we leave the EU, we walk away from it all. That I'm ashamed to be British quite often, honestly. I really am.
Treaties for, you know, maneuvering arms around a bit more, you know, really, what are these treaties?
Exactly.
Oh my
gosh. We need to up our game, you know, the planet needs to up its game, really seriously. And I think hopefully Aquarius, that's what we'll end up with after a massive water crisis and, you know, species loss or whatever. Something will wake us up, and then we'll get it all sorted, I think.
Leadership. Better leadership.
Better leadership. Women, let's have more women leaders, I say. Give us a go.
I was going to do more, but I think we're going to finish up because we've gone over much longer than we thought. So the best way to, let's say, find out more is tune in next week and see what agents are on. The Equinox panel is always a little bit longer because there's a lot to cover. But next week we have Demetrius Bagley. I think he's organising a group to do a talk on Saturn. I can't remember the title, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's going to be 8 p.m. Thursday night, Eastern Daylight Time. So anyway, we're doing more of these just as it's actually worked out well because our website's down. But so I can't sort of offer you anything more at this point, but just thank our wonderful agents who have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really interesting. I loved it. Thank you.
I mean, we all just us getting together and doing astrology, which we just absolutely love, and learning and hearing from each other. And so thank you for your time and your expertise, guys. And so cool to know that you're in Europe. Again, we're always doing stuff with the US, and that's great too. But again, good timing, and thanks for your Thursday morning. It's now over, I'm sure. But so, look, for everyone out there, thanks for watching. I hope you got a lot of good information out of that. You can rewind the video and look again and take notes and whatever you need to do. There was a lot of good stuff said. So happy equinox. Take care of yourselves. As Christos said, it's a really great time to kind of do the internal work. You know, you're not the only one on the planet, but your health is better. You know, your good health is important. So keep sane, keep cool, and keep calm, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Happy
Bye.
equinox.
Thanks, Jill.